I'm in the great company of Dr. Jeffrey Funk, Jeff Funk this morning, UK time, 11 a.m. I've followed Jeff's work for, what did we say it was, 5 years? Um,
Yeah,
Jeff, and
5 years.
early participant on the Boundless podcast, and that's when I really started to see the brilliance. And I mean, Jeff's, I'm sure he will be humble, but I will not. I think Jeff is quite outstanding. I don't know many people in the world like Jeff at all, and it's been a great pleasure to stay in touch with Jeff. Hopefully to call him a friend and certainly to be amazed by the content that he puts out. The only problem with reading Jeff's content is it makes your own feel a bit rubbish when you look at it. So, but if you can get past that, it's very enjoyable. And I'm very happy to have you here, Jeff. And of course, we're not just catching up on you. We've got a book to celebrate as well. So we'll talk about all these great things, talk a little bit about the journey of the book as well. But Alex, if you don't mind, perhaps you could just do a couple of quick intros for Jeff and I, for those who don't know, then we can jump in.
Welcome, everyone.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Go ahead.
No, welcome, everyone. Super grateful to be in amazing company today. So let's welcome Dr. Jeffrey Funk, an expert in entrepreneurship and innovation. Dr. Funk is known for his critical analysis of why many of today's ventures fail to generate profits. His forthcoming book that we just mentioned provides a structured approach to understanding the missteps in both low-tech and high-tech startup strategy. And also, we are joined here today by Richard Foster-Fletcher, chair at MKI, and a specialist in ethical AI. Richard advises senior leaders on responsible AI deployment. His expertise provides a grounded perspective on the hype surrounding AI and other emerging technologies in the startup systems. Welcome once more and looking forward to today's session.
Thank you very much, Alex. And if you're able to keep an eye on the chat, so please do in the chat pop where you're joining from us today, and you put your LinkedIn if you want. We'll share some links in the chat as we go. Alex, if you can pop Jeff's LinkedIn into the chat, his profile, because that's a great follow, and then I've started putting the book links up, but if you can put the Amazon.com link up for the Unicorns book as well, that would be one of the great places to buy it. We'll talk more about that as we go through the next 56 minutes. Jeff, perhaps in your own words, perhaps you just top up with that a little bit about your story, set the scene a bit more about you, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I'm 68 years old, so I've been following technology for a very long time. I got a bachelor's in physics a very long time ago, worked in a semiconductor factory, and then got my PhD in engineering. I really started to get into the things I am doing today in the about 2000 when I was in Japan and living in Japan. I got interested in Japan a long time ago. Some of you may remember that Japan was looked like it was going to dominate the world back in the 1980s. All that's changed, but so I started going to Japan very early. And about 2000, when I was there, the mobile internet took off first in Japan and later, much later in Europe and the U.S. And so I really started to think very carefully about when do technologies start growing and why do they some not grow? And I moved to Singapore and began as a professor at National University of Singapore, and I began teaching a course in the economics of new technologies, where over a few years I went from very optimistic. You'd expect a physicist, somebody who studies physics, to be very optimistic about technologies. But I went to a big pessimist because I was teaching this course in about 2012, 2013. I started to notice that a lot of the technologies that I thought were getting better every year weren't, because I would update the class every semester and the slides for it. And I started to notice that, well, this nanotechnology and superconductors and, a long list of others weren't getting much better. Then I started to look at some of the startups, and my students did. I had, hundreds of students in these multiple classes who were doing group projects. And so I was getting projects on all kinds of startups, all kinds of technologies, and started to notice that many of the technologies weren't making money and weren't really doing what they said they were doing. I can remember when I learned that ride sharing didn't mean that passengers were sharing a ride. They were just sharing a ride with the driver, and they call it rideshare. So by about 2015, 2016, I started to become a big pessimist. 2018, 19, I was producing, following very closely the profitability of the publicly traded unicorns. So you get these unicorns that are worth $1 billion before they go public, and then you don't really know how profitable they are because they don't have to release data. But once they start going public, I started to track them and started noticing they were unprofitable and highly unprofitable. 90% of them, almost 90% were unprofitable. And that's not changed much since then. So that's where a lot of the origins of my book came is, why are they unprofitable? And so then I started looking more closely at some of the technologies that they were involved with. And so now, of course, AI is the one that's everyone interested in. All the rest have kind of failed. People kind of forget that. They kind of think that, oh, yeah, we've got this really vibrant side sector. Everything's going great. Now AI, whoa, but that's not the way it is. It's that all these others have pretty much failed. I mean, there's a few successes, Uber and Airbnb, but most of them aren't very successful. Nothing like decades ago. But yeah, AI is the big one now that everybody's interested in.
Brilliant, Jeff. Thank you so much. And so, as I say, please do put your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as many as we can. But and how would you sum this up in one or two sentences? Like, what's actually going on here?
Well, a lot of the startups are kind of technology light. They're not anything like what was first commercialized back in Silicon Valley. Remember, it's named after the silicon transistors. And there was this whole semiconductor industry that started Silicon Valley off. And they were very advantageous, very much better than the vacuum tubes. And over time, they got better than themselves. And then we had the lasers and fiber optics for the internet. So we had a lot of technologies that were really great, that was clear benefits over the ones before them. But if you look at a lot of the startups that have been commercialized, they're trying to start a business that's very technology light. And so part of my book goes into that, goes into why, it's not just ride sharing and food delivery, but a lot of fintech, healthcare, ed tech, a lot of these things, they're very technology light. So that's one of the big reasons why I think they're losing money. The second reason is that if they did try to commercialize the technology, and a lot have, from quantum computing to electric vehicle, what do you call it, EVOP, electric vertical and takeoff landing. There was VR, virtual reality, augmented reality. A lot of these haven't diffused very quickly. They've been very slow to diffuse. And a lot of the strategy of the startups was to kind of assume that we're going to reach the main market. They're going to reach the main market very quickly. So we got to think about how to compete in the main market, when really most of them are just niches. I mean, there's a few that are somewhat successful because they have successful niches. The Starlink satellite service from Elon Musk, has a few million subscribers, and it's a niche, and he says it's going to be a niche. So that one's working out. I don't expect it to become, to take over the cellular business, at least in the next 30 to 50 years. Then there's the watches, the wearables. Now, of course, 10 years ago, people were telling us that we'd be wearing all kinds of these wearables, not just on our wrists, but on our head and on our legs and all over our body, just monitoring everything that's going on in our body. Of course, that hasn't happened, but people do use these Apple Watches to monitor their heart rate, how far they walk, things like that. And so some of these technologies are working, but it's really kind of niche applications, and they're not really getting better that fast. So I don't expect them to take over the world. And others, they're just not going to happen. Hyperloop and some of these others are, way far away.
We went through a stage where it seemed completely irrelevant to have profitability to be able to IPO, but in IPOing, you could still make the investors huge amounts of money on a company that never actually got to any serious or even significant profitability. Have we passed that peak, or are we still in that?
Well, in the book, I call it the big startup bubble of 2021, when the startup prices of these publicly traded unicorns and also privately traded valuation index, these stock prices went very high. So you're right. A lot of these VCs made good money off these companies. If they sold their stock, they made good money because there was a lot of demand for those stocks.
Mm,
Um, and but after that bubble popped, um, share prices have been very low for most of the startups and have remained low for most startups. There's been a few, like I mentioned, Uber and Airbnb have got, but most of the others, haven't gone up, have stayed low. Uh, and now you see a little pop from the AI startups, but that's in the private valuations, most notably,
yeah.
companies like Anthropic and OpenAI. But
Mm.
they aren't going public. And the reason they're not going public doing IPOs is because the public isn't interested, right? Or at least they're perceived they're not interested. So they may stay private
But they don't
for,
need to IPO, Jeff. I mean, they don't
pardon?
have any problem raising money, so there's no incentive for them to IPO, is there?
No, you're right. And see, that was the case with a lot of these startups, even like 5, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, they delayed their IPOs and they stayed private much longer than any other startups had stayed private, decades before,
Yes.
uh, because they weren't profitable. But nobody, people, there was so much VC money, there was so much demand from investors they all wanted to invest in
Mm.
these VCs that it was okay not to go private, not to do an IPO.
So let's try and focus in as an example, perhaps on OpenAI, if we can try that one, because just to catch you up, you talked about technology light. I think one of the best examples of that was WeWork being called a technology
Yeah,
company,
yeah,
which I mean, even I was baffled by how someone that could lease offices was a high tech company.
yeah, yeah,
And even Uber, I mean, come on. I mean, yeah, it's a nice little model, but is it a technology company? I mean,
yeah,
I guess it's like going around a startup incubator and everybody's an entrepreneur, right, Jeff? Everybody's an entrepreneur, whether you've opened a shop down the road or whether you're trying to do quantum computing, everybody's an entrepreneur now, right? I mean, it's just thrown around.
yeah.
Whereas entrepreneurship for me means, you're doing something in a business where it might not even be possible to achieve it. So what's so if we take OpenAI, I understand that they're on track to lose about $5 billion, I think. They've been backed to the tune of about $13 billion from Microsoft. They've fundraised another six or seven, I think. I don't know all the numbers off, the bat. They aren't planning to IPO. They could obviously IPO in some respects and try and get a quick buck and return on that investment. Clearly nowhere near profitability. And I mean, I can't even see how they're getting to profitability at the start when they've got a product that a lot of people use for free. Other people use it for a measly $20 a month, which is, I mean, is nothing.
Yeah.
I would pay 10 or 100 times that a month to use that product in my business. And then it uses enormous amounts of power, right, Jeff, and cooling and data centers, um, and not to mention the cost of actually, managing and developing the AI. So, what's is that the example in the modern terms of what you've been talking about, that they're betting big, that a bit like brain computer interfaces or quantum computing, it's just that this has the potential just to be fucking massive, Jeff. I mean, is that the point of this? And then everybody gets incredibly rich if you just can hold on long enough and keep putting enough money in.
Yeah, you're right. They could go public and they probably would make money going public. But I think Sam Altman has incredibly big ambitions. He really uh, wants to be more than just the founder of a somewhat, of a successful IPO. He wants it to be more than that. He's probably thinks he's as smart as Elon Musk or some of these other people, right? These guys, there's some pretty big egos there with Musk and Andreessen and a number of people. The big egos, and Sam Altman wants to get the respect of those people and be talked about in the same breath as those people. So he's looking for something really big. And so he's waiting. He's probably waiting until he has better data, right? He wants to wait until he has better numbers, revenues, profits, etc.
But what's this actually got to do with business? Do they need customers? Do they need to make a profit? Does any of this matter for OpenAI?
Well, eventually it does, but right now the hype about AI is so big. A lot of these investors think that, so much is going to happen, that the whole economy is going to be changed. I mean, think about AI. This started a long time ago. Back in 2012, Eric Brynjolfsson and McAfee wrote this book when they were at MIT about how it was going to change everything. They came out in 2014. By 2016, the big consulting firms were saying that AI would be a $16 trillion market by 2030. These are big numbers, 16 trillion. This is not something that's small. And that kind of went away over the years. The hype kind of lost it. And by 2022, people had kind of given up on AI. AI was kind of like, well, it's over. And then generative AI came up in 2023. And probably my interpretation is that many of these tech bros said, wait a minute, it's all dying. We gotta throw something out there to get the hype back up and to get the valuations back up and get money, because otherwise we're going to run out of money to invest in these startups. And so we got to do something. So OpenAI was perfect. So OpenAI releases this chat GPT. People begin to think that this is going to put all these people out of work. Now, remember that back in 2016, people were saying this all the time, that everybody was going to be put out of work by AI. I remember in Singapore, these television advertisements that, everybody, doctors and nurses and everybody was going to, and accountants and lawyers are all going to be put out of work. None of it was happening. But now with ChatGPT, it's come back. Everybody's going to be put out of work. And, it's hard to argue with the true believers, because there are cases where it works very well. I mean, people who use it for marketing, for making videos and things, advertisements, it helps their productivity. And for people who are just sending email out, they say, look, I can write a lot more emails. I can do all these advertising emails really fast. And so there's a very small sliver of the economy, really, in in search and advertising and news and where social media, where it appears to provide a big productivity boost. But of course, that's a very small part of the economy. I mean, what I've been saying for years, and a lot of other people have been saying, hey, wait a minute, what about making things in factories? What about growing crops and harvesting them? What about mines where we mine minerals and things? What about hospitals and doctors' offices? What about, right? There's all this other work, building houses, constructing buildings, right? That it's kind of ignored by the chat GPT people. They just kind of say, oh, anybody who's writing emails or writing reports, they're going to need this, right? And so it's kind of supposed to be what I call the big support worker revolution. It isn't about the direct workers. It isn't about the actual thing that the companies are making. It's about all these support workers. And this is going to revolutionize all the support workers. But of course, support workers are measured by whether or not they produce something that becomes profitable, like developers of cars produce cars that are suddenly much more profitable than they used to be. Developers of drugs or whatever use ChatGPT to, make drugs faster and much better than the ones in the past. And of course, it could be legal or advertised. It could be any other thing. But it's a support worker revolution. It's not a direct worker revolution. It's not a factory revolution, or it's not the operating kind of level of the company.
So it's partly true then this time around about jobs. There are some jobs exposed then, you think?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just nowhere near, again, the hype of this sort of mass
Yeah.
displacement, you think?
Yeah. Yeah. And the easiest way to talk about the hype, of course, is in terms of money. So Sequoia Venture Capital. What's the other one? Goldman Sachs. There's a number of people, David Kahn and a few other people have pointed out how much revenues are needed to justify all these investments in the generative AI infrastructure. Pretty big. And, the $600 billion number gets thrown around. And yet, Chat GPT is down a few billion. PitchBook claims that the total generative AI software revenue this year will be about 17 billion. So that's a lot better than the 5 billion or so from OpenAI, but it's nowhere near the 600 billion that's needed. And of course, a lot of people, they always like to talk about, well, the dot-com bubble is the same. No, it wasn't the same. I have an article coming out probably tomorrow in MarketWatch that shows all these numbers. Numbers that are in my book, but I kind of didn't put them all in the same place. And that's what I did in the article now. I mean, if you look at 2000, when the bubble was peaking for the internet bubble, and compare that to 2024 $17 billion AI software revenue, because I think this is the year the AI bubble's peaking. Maybe it won't. Maybe it's going to get bigger. But anyways, back in 2000, you had really large, if you wanted to use the internet, it wasn't free. It wasn't like ChatGPT. ChatGPT, you can get some free services and use a little bit free. But if you wanted the internet, you got to pay for an internet subscription. You had to buy a PC. That was a significant outlay back then. It was much more expensive than now. And many people bought e-commerce. They bought PCs online. They bought a lot of things. And if you add up those numbers, there's some double counting because the PCs, you're kind of counting the PCs twice. But in any case, if you count all those numbers, it's like 1.5 trillion in today's dollars. 1.5 trillion, right? You look at how much they were paying for PCs, how much they were buying on e-commerce, how much they were paying for internet subscriptions. Those weren't cheap, right? They still aren't cheap. They're cheaper than they were. But so there was this huge amount of money being spent. So when somebody says, wow, it's the fastest technology uptake of all time, well, if you look at all these fastest technology uptakes, they're all these social media kind of, things that you only have to download on your computer. It's not about anything else. It's not about the stuff that you had to do with the internet infrastructure. I mean, there was internet infrastructure. I'm not counting the revenues for that because money for that, because that I'm kind of saying that's kind of equivalent to the infrastructure that we need for generative AI now. So clearly there's a problem. The internet bubble popped, and yet it had 1.5 trillion in revenues. What does that say about generative AI?
I'll come to that in a second. Paul, you have your hand up. You want to raise a point?
Yeah, thank you. Jeffrey, I've got a question for you. And the story behind it is the MKAI group has a really big and vibrant WhatsApp group that talks about just about everything in the space we're interested in. Yesterday, an argument kicked off, and I won't mention the name of the person that posted it. And my question isn't what you might expect when I just share this tiny thing with you. This is the post, and it was linked to a bigger article on LinkedIn. AI is rapidly transforming the world. I don't find any evidence that AI is rapidly transforming the world. It's kind of in there somewhere. The next bit was, and education is no exception. And I see little or no evidence that education is being transformed in any way by AI. Then we get, however, while some countries are embracing this change, others are struggling to keep up, as if somehow we need to keep up. There are people who are not struggling, apparently. This raises important questions. I agree with that bit. How can AI be integrated into global education systems, as if it needs to, as if there's even a case for it? Are current methods enough to prepare children for a future dominated by technology? You often call out this stuff, but my question to you is, those authors, when I look them up and read their non-AI stuff, they tend to be a bit more intelligent and evidence-based. So my question is, why in this particular space, kind of the world of generative AI, are perfectly intelligent people behaving so stupidly?
Well, if you look at the generative AI bubble now, it's about 10 trillion. if you look at how much the market capitalization of Magnificent Seven has gone up since January 2023, the last, almost 2 years, it's 10 trillion. Now, do you think that the companies who are benefiting from that increase in market capitalization might give some money to people to write some articles positive about AI, just some articles, and maybe even go on to post some of my posts, or Richard Self, or there's a whole bunch of Gary Marcus who write rather critical things of AI. There's this money that's going out there. That's we think of this media and we think, oh, the media is biased. Well, the media, people are getting a lot of money to write these articles, and of course they're going to say these things. And of course, there's also a little bit of truth to what they say, because there are some industries in which there is a big update of AI. I mentioned the advertising videos, advertising mail messages and things. But there's also students who are using AI to write their papers. Now, that's not helping them get educated, right? That's not helping them get educated. In fact, it's making the job a lot harder for teachers. So this is kind of what Gary Marcus talks about. He talks about this damage that AI is doing. In some ways, AI might be doing more damage than it is benefits, because the kids that are just writing their articles with generative AI, they're not learning anything. They're not learning what they should be learning. And these people will claim that, oh, teachers should just embrace it and have them write their articles with generative AI, and then have them debate it in class and talk about what's wrong or right. Wow. I mean, I'll tell you, we all know, as if you've taught before, how students, they always do the first part, not the second part, right? They produce the report, and you can give them feedback, and they're kind of lose interest. And that's what's going to happen with generative AI in education. It's going to be a disaster. This is one of the worst applications, but you're right. It's being used to justify the AI revolution.
Just to push back slightly, if you don't mind a quick follow-up, it's simply, there's a danger that and we're often labelled as skeptics rather than realists, that we're falling into the same trap. I work with 2 UK universities. It's not much of a problem. A handful of students are using it badly. They don't produce great work. They kind of come off it fairly quickly. The lecturers are a bit worried, but not that worried. It's all fairly mediocre. And you mentioned it might be the future. The idea that there's a transformational thing happening anywhere, I'm yet to be convinced.
Okay, you may know about that better than me. I don't teach at a university anymore, so I don't really know how many students are using it. There's a lot of controversy about that because the AI detectors aren't very good. So things may be better than you're saying. And so the people who are claiming that it's leading to an AI revolution, right? They're wrong in multiple counts.
Brilliant, thank you.
I see some cameras have gone on, so if you do want to raise some points or ask Jeff some questions, it's very much an open session today. Now that we've got to the halfway point, and I've asked a few things, but I just want to raise one, I suppose, slightly counterpoint, Jeff, and then we must talk about your book, is what about the stealth use of AI? I mean, a lot of companies, AI is being used, I mean, generative AI, but people are keeping it quiet. Why would you tell your boss that you've just saved 40% of your time this week? Do you think a lot of it lies under the surface, perhaps?
That could be. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are using it and getting some benefit from it, some of the things I just mentioned. But there's probably also some people are using it who aren't supposed to and aren't getting any benefits, who are making work for other people. One of the things I always point out is that if you're able to produce more emails, if you're more productive in producing emails and reports, somebody's got to read those. So, you got to look at the process. That's what I focus on. There's too many people focused on individuals. I know Ethan Mollick, his book recommends that everybody just think about their own job and think about how they can use generative AI to be more productive. And I think that's wrong. I think that you want the company to define their processes and think about how generative AI can help improve those processes. And, I'm stunned that some of these business professors are ignoring this, because we've known this for 60 years. We've known this. I mean, this goes back to the beginning of the just-in-time revolution when we realized that it wasn't useful if somebody just ran their machine all out to see how many parts they could make when they weren't needed. Right? That's what just-in-time manufacturing was about. It was making it when you needed it, so that the parts flowed through the factory very effectively, so that it didn't take a year for them to go through the factory. It took a week, so that you needed less money to pay for it. Parts weren't sitting around. They didn't get damaged. There was all kinds of reasons for just-in-time manufacturing. Most people in manufacturing, it's hard to find anybody who wouldn't agree with what I just said. They're believers in this. And there was a book that came out about 1990 called Re-Engineering the Corporation by James Champion, Michael Hammer, that kind of applied the same principles to product development processes and other processes within companies. It said companies need to focus on processes, figure out how to get these processes done very quickly. Well, that's what we need to do now. We need to define those processes and try to use generative AI to improve those processes.
It always strikes me there's at least in the football, in the Premier League, there's at least 6 individuals who are all paid to win the Premier League. Yeah, obviously only one of them can actually win the Premier League, despite how much money's thrown into it. There's probably 3 or so companies that are making big bets on generative AI, which would be Microsoft / OpenAI, Amazon / Anthropic, and then Google. I mean, in the pure plays, is it like the Premier League where potentially only one can win, or could there be multiple winners here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that right now, the big companies are getting all the attention. But I still stand by it. I think the generative AI bubble is going to bust. And the share prices for all these companies are going to go down. But I do think there's useful work out there. I get a lot of people who contact me and tell me, I'm doing some AI that's useful. I have people that come meet me. There's a restaurant I tell people, I say, I can't walk well, so you got to come to this restaurant near my house. And they come and they tell me that they're doing something on AI that's useful. Like one guy started telling me about how they used AI to load these cargo planes better, to load cargo in planes, because you got to figure out how all this stuff fits in there.
Yeah.
Now, that's not an application that's going to change the world in terms of, but it's going to improve productivity. There are lots of these applications, lots of them. And there are people working on them. There are people using AI in laboratories and things. Some of them will succeed, and some of them will succeed big time. I think that's where the future winners will come out of. It won't be from some of these, OpenAI and some of these guys. These guys will not end up dominating everything. OpenAI may actually end up surviving, but I know Gary Marcus doesn't think so, but it may survive. But I don't think I think that we're missing a lot of people in their rush to determine who's the winner. They're missing a lot. And I've kind of believed this. This is all behind my argument that people are hyping things. It's that people think they know too much. People are so quick to say, I know. I got my son listening to me right now because he says this a lot to me. He's like, I know. I say, no, you don't know. you told me you knew it last week, and then you got it wrong a few days later on the paper. You don't know. You got to stop. The first thing you have to do is say, I don't know, and I'm going to think about this in more detail.
Okay, but just honking back to the .com bubble, because you've obviously talked a lot about bubbles today. Let's break that down. So the idea seemed to be that you would take a niche e-commerce proposition and you put a website up, and where there wasn't a means of buying this thing online, now there was, vans.com, lamps.com, pets.com, all these sorts of things. And okay, maybe, the e-commerce logistical part wasn't ready. Maybe there wasn't enough people shopping online. But there was no innovation, was there? You're just taking pictures of the product, putting them up, putting a price, and then linking into some merchants and some means to buy those. I mean, that's not innovative. So are we saying that these same companies they're similar to pets.com, that they're just jumping on the bandwagon? There isn't actually any real innovation, or these startups
if you
different?
Look back at the internet bubble, I like to call it the internet bubble because because it really wasn't dot-coms that formed the bubble. It was companies like Intel, Cisco, Compaq, Nokia. These are the companies. It was all these big incumbents that got huge valuations. And, Amazon was nothing. It was a really small company. It wasn't a big deal. And there were, of course, pets.com, a lot of companies that were losing money. But the real bubble, if you look in terms of market capitalization, was for the big companies. You know what? That's the same as now. It's not the dot-coms. It's not these startups. It's the big companies, right? Google and Microsoft and Amazon and so on, that are being valued and they're expecting to win. So the internet bubble, people missed it. People missed the fact that it ended up being a new company, Amazon, and there were some other companies, Google and of course eBay and PayPal. There was a number of companies. So it could be that today's generative AI bubble, what emerges from the popping of the bubble and what's left standing is just the big companies. Whereas what was left standing after the internet bubble pop were big companies. They still survived, but there were also a few of these startups that did really, really well. And I'm wondering, are there going to be startups like that who do really, really well after the generative AI bubble bursts?
What does it mean to win for those companies? From my perspective, that would be probably to be the incumbent desktop business AI on every machine around the world, like Internet Explorer was or like Gmail was. I mean, is that what they mean by winning?
Yeah. Yeah. So there'll be different kinds of software emerging. I mean, we have this ChatGPT service, but it could also be other types of services. I have thought for a long time that we would see services emerge for different applications. So there'd be services that emerge for developing drugs, AI services. How much of it is generative AI and predictive AI? I don't know. But there'll be different types of software packages, software as a service for different applications. And so it's very possible that it'll be different companies too. Now, many of those companies may have licensed some technology from ChatGPT from OpenAI. In fact, that it's probably OpenAI will probably survive as a licensor of their basic technology. They will probably make money from
that. And is there a company where this isn't the case? Is there a story that you would write about on LinkedIn where it is genuine, that when they are moving towards profitability well, where they are run well, where it is real, where it's not hype in the AI space? Is there anybody doing it properly from your?
I don't know.
Somebody like Perplexity, possibly.
Well, if there is, I would say it's a publicly traded company. So, whether you want to call them A or an I or not, but Palantir, companies like this. So even that, what was the cybersecurity company that fell apart after their software didn't work and caused a big crash of all the computers? CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike claims it used AI. I don't know how much it uses AI, but it claimed it was an AI company. It was getting close to profitability and had a big customer base. So, those kinds of companies may be moving towards profitability. But the question how much AI do they do? I mean, one of the things people tell me is, come on, Amazon has been doing AI for years, decades, and of course they're kind of confusing all the algorithms, big data with AI, right? They've been using these algorithms and they added big data. And now you say, well, they're doing AI. Well, how much better is the AI than the big data and the algorithms, right? It's really hard to say. And I suppose there are some people who really, really know AI, really, break those down, give a good answer. But I don't see that type of analysis published.
What's your rebuttal, if there is one, that you have to people who talk about AGI and make these bold claims that are even bolder than anything we've talked about in this session?
Well, there could be applications where AI has adds a lot of value above and beyond big data. But AGI, now you're talking about something else. And I'm not an AI person. I mean, I started off in physics and engineering, but when I read the things said by Jan LeCun, when I read some of the studies on frequency of hallucinations, I mean, Nature had a paper in the last month about reasoning. They had a paper also on reasoning. It's not going at a fast rate, right? And one of the things I did a lot of my career was look at rates of improvement of technologies, Moore's law and bandwidth, and there's a whole bunch of things like LEDs and things. I looked at all this stuff. And if you want to be 99.999% accurate, it takes a long time, because once you get to 99% accurate, you're still a long ways from there. Because if you've got 1% bad, then maybe, and then you got 30% improvement a year, and next year it won't be 1%, it'll be 0.7%. Then it'll go down to 0.4%. Then it'll go down to 0.1%. And that's if it's 30% a year, which I don't think it is. I mean, that's what we had with Moore's law, 34%. It will take forever to get to 99.999%, the six nines that people talk about. This is really hard, to get this. And people talk about diminishing returns in the move to AGI. It's going to emerge.
I think it's anything but inevitable. And if we want to talk about intelligence, let's not forget that the dinosaurs had 100+ million years to evolve intelligence, and nothing happened. So it can't just point at time.
I
want to come to Alex and a few questions from the chat, but let's not miss out on just talking about your book again. It's been a lot of work, a long journey to get this incredible book out tomorrow. So congratulations. I encourage everybody here to get a copy and share that link around. From your perspective, Jeff, some feelings about the book. What would you say about it to encourage people to go out there and make sure they read it straight away?
Well, I've spent my life thinking about, let me back up further. Well, I've spent my life thinking about economics of new technologies, and whether how fast new technologies get better. And so I'm coming at this whole issue of startups and everything from a very different perspective. Nobody even talks about this in business schools. They don't talk about whether something's economical. What their message of business schools is generally, you just manage the business and you can reduce the costs. Well, no, some things get better a lot faster than others. We know that. We look at Moore's law and other things. So it's not everything that gets better. It isn't just about managing, right, your business. It's about choosing a business that can be economical. See, a lot of the discussion, there's very little discussion about how little effort went into choosing the businesses the VCs were going to invest in. They ended up investing all in the same businesses. It was almost like they weren't even thinking. And so I'm talking about that. And I'm talking about this for both the technology light and the technology heavy kind of businesses. And for the heavy ones, I talk about how fast improvements are occurring and what's going on there. And, nobody does that. Most people will say, well, that's your opinion. I'll give you my opinion. And what I say is, no, I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm giving you my analysis. I'm saying, I'm looking at all these technologies, using and describing how performance improving on a descriptive sense, because there's no real hard data, because there's no real improvement or very small improvement. So I'm giving you something that you're not going to see, and that I haven't been able to produce on my post too. I mean, you see it on my post, but the argument I'm making it's too complex to present in a post. So I present it in some articles. I have an article in American Affairs coming out in a month or so. So you can wait and read that article if you want before you buy the book. I don't mind. But so I think I'm giving you something that's a lot more than you're seeing from other people.
And you give huge amounts of value, Jeff. And if anybody's not following Jeff on LinkedIn, that's a mistake. That is one of the best reads on LinkedIn, and the quantity and the quality. Alex, we've got about quarter for now. What are the questions coming in for Jeff?
First of all, thank you, Jeff, for all your insights so far. They sparked a beautiful conversation in the comment section, especially on LinkedIn Live. We have so many comments where people are excited, worried about AI being used in the wrong way, concerned, like all sorts of feelings arise in the comment section. But I would like to pick up one of the questions among all of these topics. What three AI-related things keep you awake at night? What are the three topics that you think about the most? Thank you.
Well, I suppose that, when you've got a different opinion than everybody or a different conclusion than everybody, you have to be very careful. You're worried you're going to get something big, way wrong, and then that's the end of everything. And so I'm always looking for the application that I've missed. So I read lots of these articles, a lot of weird articles. You'll get someone, I just read one a few days ago about HR. How is AI transforming HR? And there were applications in there. They're just very, very small. Now it could be that they'll get bigger, right? So that's my concern, is that I don't be too negative, right? I don't want to be too negative. I know that I have to be careful because I don't want people to just dismiss me. AI, people who are doing real AI work, I don't just dismiss me and say, well, he just says he all he can do is criticize AI. He can never say there's something useful in AI. But you see in my book, actually, I say something positive about a number of applications for AI. It's just that I think they're going to take a long time. But I think, like many people, I worry about being accurate.
Thank you so much. Also, if you had the opportunity to talk to any leading organization or company, what would your advice be to them? What would you suggest to organizations such as the United Nations, what they need to do to safeguard humanity?
Well, I don't think the United Nations is concerned about this. I think the companies, potential users of AI, should be concerned. And they want to look for the low-hanging fruit. They want to look for the easy applications. I mean, basically, over the last 10 years, all of these organizations have been led down, just, through fairyland. It's, thinking that they were going to put everybody out of work, and that was so easy. And it's not so easy. After 10 years of the hype for healthcare, not only is IBM Watson gone, but really we're at the level of, okay, we're doing it, we're automating, we're improving administrative work, and what you want to do, I think a lot more could have been done if these people start off with realistic expectations for AI and said, okay, we're going to try to augment work. We're going to try to help AI be used for reading CAT scans and things. All of that, it can help, but you just got to start off looking for applications augmented, not this full replacement. And I can still remember arguing with people on LinkedIn. They were just saying, no, it's better. I saw this study, and then a study that said it was better than humans. And then you find out when you read follow-up studies and you look at surveys of users, no, it's not. But there is value. And so you want to find the low-hanging fruit, right? And so for my argument always is, want to find the first applications, the second applications, the third applications. And that's true with any technology. We want to find those first ones.
Thanks, Alex. Should we come to the room as well? Tree, did you want to raise a question for Jeff?
Hi. Yes, I suppose my question was, I was in the course of my work, I run a platform which looks at social issues through the lens of the latest advertising. And I was interested, not to say alarmed, to read about ectogenesis and, full replicating what is an essential human function at present through AI with artificial wombs and that kind of things. And it seems to me very much the crux of what you and Richard look at in terms of, business, but humanity and ethics as well. And I just appreciate your thoughts on that, if you have any. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure in your question. Artificial wombs. You're talking about, raising a baby outside of the mother.
Yes.
Okay. And then somehow AI helps with that.
As I understand it, yes, because you need certain systems to be running that kind of
Okay.
technology. I may be mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't say that I'm an expert on that application. Sorry.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to raise a question for Jeff or make a point? Mark on the camera.
I no, not really. Just a couple of observations from listening to the conversation. Um, as I think Jeff knows, I take a very skeptical position about AGI. And I think that this underpins why and my reasons for this, I think, underpin why I'm skeptical about whether Gen AI will ever solve the so-called hallucination problem. It isn't obvious to me that any AI understands anything at all. And if that's the case, then we're always going to get problems there'll always be ways in which AI will go wrong because it isn't actually understanding what it's doing. It's at the core level, it's manipulating ones and zeros. And those ones and zeros might refer to elephants, bananas, or cats. The computer doesn't know. I'm referring, of course, to John Still's Chinese room argument in basing this position. And because of the fact that at the very deep level, it isn't clear to me that any AI and any computational system understands anything. It isn't clear to me that LLMs understand anything. What is amazing about LLMs is just how much of a veneer of understanding they can present, even though they really don't understand what they're doing. So I think there's some really deep, interesting philosophical questions to ask about language and human language use and how amazing it is that LLMs can capture, at least to a first approximation, quite a lot of human language use without actually really understanding anything. So yeah, my position is I'm skeptical AGI is going to happen. I think that has implications for not just in the AI, in the pure AI field, but in applications such as autonomous driving. That makes me skeptical to think that level 5 autonomy will ever be genuinely reached. And then just a couple of minor things. I think picking up what Jeff said that AI was going through the doldrums in 2010. I'm not so certain it was. In 2012, we had AlexNet's entry into the ImageNet image processing competition, where it just trounced the floor on things that had gone before because it was one of the first big examples of deep learning in image processing. Building on.
No, I said 2020, 2022. What I was saying is that right before generative AI came out, a lot of the business world had lost interest in AI. Not completely, but the hype had gone. The hype had gone, and there were companies still working on it. But the hype about AI had kind of gone away.
Well, I think you have two things. You have these artificial narrow intelligences, which have been used for a long time to do certain engineering problems, and people in engineering, I think, have used them for a long time. They just don't get immediate attention. And then you have something like ChatGPT comes along, which at the first sight looks like it is going to lead to the real thing. If we can only build bigger versions of ChatGPT, eventually AGI will be reached, and that gets a lot of media noise around it, and brings in a lot of investment and a lot of talk around it. But it's my contention that the people have been using narrow AI solutions for a very long time, and I didn't really see a particular fall off either in 2010 or in 2020, to be honest.
Well, the hype had gone down, and I'd like to say something a little about hype because you raised a good point about how LLMs talk a good story, so they sound smart. But there's also a lot of VCs who talk a good story, and so they sound smart. All right, they've been able to sell a big narrative for AI and other technologies for years, and you have to and a lot of this hasn't worked out. I mean, my book goes into a lot of technologies, not just AI, in which they didn't succeed very well, and you have to then stop and think, well, what is it with these VCs? They've been pushing things that haven't worked out that well. Are they really as smart as they claim they are? are they just like these LLMs who talk a good story, but don't really have an understanding about whether a technology is going to have a big impact? They're just guessing like everybody else. They don't have any particular, deep insights or they have very few deep insights other than they don't have more deep insights than other people do, than the rest of us do.
I think one of the big use cases of AI that's had huge amounts, billions and billions of dollars invested in it, is the autonomous vehicle industry.
Yeah, it is.
And in my forthcoming book, the manuscript of which was literally just last night sent to our editors, our claim is that AVs actually give a really good benchmark for AI in the real world, because there's a very well-defined use case and enormous amounts of money have been put into it. In fact, some have argued that even Elon Musk has said that without what he calls generalized intelligence, which is his synonym for AGI, Tesla's effectively worth absolutely nothing. And he sort of pinned his entire pivoted Tesla to basically a model where they're trying to use a simple, cheap camera. And it's a very disruptive model after Christian Andersen's, to use his terms, because you've got a very cheap sensor, the camera, and everything is being done in software and the AI. And in fact, just recently, this summer, Musk has claimed that he's gone to a complete end-to-end vision transformer model, and he's done away with all earlier kinds of AI, and he's looking to crack the problem that way. My hunch is that he's not going to succeed, and we're going to have some serious casualties along the way with autonomous vehicles. And it's interesting that Google and Waymo have gone a very different way to Tesla. Tesla does some really brilliant things about how to get data. Their model for data collection is just genius, in my opinion. But it seems like Waymo, you've got a much more narrowly defined use case for your autonomous vehicles, and they might have some success because they just need a level 4 operational design domain to work using AV in a particular tight context, and there may well be money to be earned that way. But I don't think it's going to be quite as big as some of the forecasters were thinking that Tesla might be worth.
I'll jump in there, and I mean, I think it's a great example that we're discussing here of AI, because it's also just obvious, isn't it? You can look around the roads and just go, this obviously can't work. And I think from my perspective, you can take all the humans off the road and just put AVs on the road, fine, it'll work. But the real challenge isn't navigating roads, it's navigating people.
Absolutely.
And that's completely incompatible.
We live in a real world, and there's an uncountably infinite number of possible situations.
You can't do it. You literally can't do it. We all see examples.
4 years ago, I heard a number of $100 billion having been spent on AVs by 2020.
Yeah.
This number came from an AV company in Singapore. You probably didn't know there's one in Singapore. There was. It's all the people have been fired, but one of Singapore's biggest engineering companies, ST Engineering, had a big AV group, probably for military transport, but
so did Uber, actually. I know Richard said he didn't think Uber were a tech company, but they spent a lot of money on AVs until they got caught up with the Lewandowski scandal, who was accused of stealing code from Google. But prior to that, they were investing heavily in AVs.
They wanted to get rid of those pesky humans, didn't they? They were costing so much money. Yes, that's a good point, Mark.
So the point I want to make is there's probably hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent on self-driving vehicles development. Even if they succeed, it's been a huge investment.
Paul, you want to comment?
Yeah, it was just a comment, particularly in that broader field, Jeffrey, about innovation and tech, and not just AI, which is the latest kind of significant use case. But I've done, I guess, most of my research is with SMEs and startups over 35 years. And I'm just interested in some phenomena that I think you hint at regularly in the posts that I read on LinkedIn. And what it is there's a huge amount of evidence that things revert. And this is one of the less told stories, but maybe the most significant, that there are companies that use Matterport to create virtual shops that have just gone back to websites, and all they've kept is the cool little tool that was there anyway, which is a 3D image that you can move around. That's not AI. There's a lot of stuff around at the moment, Copilot being brought with Teams, and then people aren't using Copilot a year later. they all bought Yammer, and then a year later, email had reasserted itself as it is doing on every communication-based AI. People buy it, they buy the hype, but a year later, the story is it didn't do it for us. We've lost our money. We don't get a refund. And what that means is that SMEs that are trying to start up in AI actually behave a bit like very dodgy sellers on Amazon. They rely on dissatisfied customers, but going up to scale. So everyone buys it. They're a one-off purchase and they're never going to upgrade it. So you have to keep hyping up to get new customers because customers aren't with you a year later.
Yeah. Well, my son has bought one of those AI software things that didn't work very well.
Jeff, it is now 12:01 in the UK. We asked for an hour with you. Would you like to stay for a few more minutes, or is it time up
Sure.
for you?
No, it's fine.
Oh, we'll just see if there's a few more questions, and then we can bring this to a natural close. I'm curious, and I hope you'll forgive me for asking you this, but what part does AI play in your writing process?
In my Horizon process?
Sorry, what part does AI play in your writing process, your personal writing process?
Oh, nothing. Nothing.
Zero.
I mean, I just use Google. I've tried generative AI. I tried it probably more with the images because I tried to make a book cover, but it didn't
Okay.
work out. And the publisher wanted to do it themselves anyway, so I had to give up on that. But no, I'm not, I tried it a long time ago and I don't use it.
Are you monitoring the changes in this? I mean, if we just look at the history here, it's interesting. We talked about autonomous vehicles being a good example of actually how capable artificial intelligence is at the moment, obviously with huge investment behind it. ChatGPT 3.5 was a potential example of that as well, that if you just let AI loose, this is what you get: massive hallucinations, inconsistencies, inaccuracies. And it feels to me, not any of us is claiming to be an AI expert in that sense here, but that it's been kind of hand cranked a lot now to get us to where we are, with lots and lots and lots of narrow use cases that seemingly work, but because they've been intervened with, there's been interventions, and if you find one of those areas where there hasn't been intervention, it just doesn't work. It's flawed. But if you started using ChatGPT 3.5 to help you with your writing and then didn't check in after that, then you would think it was absolutely useless. But to what extent are you playing around with Canvas or the reasoning models? And is that changing, do you think? Is it actually becoming more useful?
Yeah, I rely more on the analysis of others now than using it myself.
But I guess
And the
you're able to
article.
spot it quite quickly.
Well, I suppose it's my age, and
Oh,
so yeah, I read a lot of articles. That's where I get most of my information, and I'm always looking for something that disagrees with me.
and do you get annoyed? Do you get frustrated with these articles and just blatant nonsensical hype?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there's lots of articles that don't say anything.
Mm.
They just say that there's something going to come out, but I don't, I think that it's easier to see get mad at the articles that are posted on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of people who post, and they get 1,000 likes every single time. There's like, I know at least 5 people that do this. And it's usually, it's a game changer. It's going to change everything. And it's all just done kind of in a narrow thing. It's just kind of some small thing that doesn't really try to understand the bigger picture. And so those kind of annoy me because I think that, people should really be thinking a little more deeply about it. But that's the way people are. And I think that there's a lot of AI people that are that way. I was a mathematician. I started off in math and physics. You major in physics, you take 3 years of differential equations and vector analysis and on, just really heavy math. And so I come from that background. And when I went to work at a semiconductor factory, I realized that people weren't, people weren't using that. They were using something else. They were using problem-solving skills. And that required knowledge about kind of common sense about the business. And so I see the same problem now with a lot of the AI people who they kind of don't have any common sense, particularly with young AI people. They know all the math and stuff, and they just are convinced that how could this be wrong? Well, they're unable to step back and say, well, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. And the book Snake Oil has a lot of these funny examples, about people that they didn't recognize that the AI was given a ridiculous answer because they didn't have the knowledge of healthcare, and they didn't try to get a knowledge of healthcare. So people are doing this, and that's kind of one of the messages of the book. You have to stop and think about the business that you're dealing with, and what are the levers that affect costs and quality? What are the measures of quality that are really important? And are they getting better?
Do you feel lonely?
Well, I feel I have to be very, very careful, or I'm gonna, there's going to be criticism, and there's very few business professors who agree with me. I got a bunch of business professors to write testimonials, but there was a number of them who didn't, who were very angry at what I've written. A lot. And because, a lot of business professors, academics in general, they kind of believe in the academic process. They believe in what the business professor are doing. If you present something that's different than what they're doing, they're like, what are you talking about? We are the experts.
You are a certain age, Jeff. You don't look it, but you are. And I imagine that you're not doing this particularly to make money. So do you think it's the pressures of commercialism and needing to make money that are skewing some of these leaders? Or not just money, but with the professors, it's all career stuff, isn't it? And so on.
My book doesn't say much about academia and the problems in academia, but I wrote a paper in American Affairs a couple of years ago that says a lot more about it. There's this pressure to publish and to publish anything, and there's just too many papers out there. And for most people, they can't be concerned with trying to do something that's useful. In general, I find this to be a generational issue. The professors who really can do something useful are older. It's the young professors who have fallen in this, particularly in the business field. I keep wondering how strong this is in other fields, but I don't see, I see people that, they kind of don't really they don't read the histories of technologies. See, that's what I spent my life doing. I read so many histories, 1,000 books I once owned. And 100 histories of technologies, all kinds of technologies. I mean, old and new ones. That's where I got my information, because I didn't find the academic business literature dealing with it in a proper level. And so that's where I've come from. And for those of you who've read the books by, there's a guy who's very famous for writing about energy. There's so many books on the history of energy. But that's kind of the types of books that I read.
And how much of your day are you willing to spend getting into debates with people who challenge you or confront you on these things?
Well, right now I'm willing to do a lot because I'm trying to sell books, and I know that's it takes work because I'm not a famous person. If you've sold books before, then you're going to be more likely to sell books than somebody like me. If you have a position at a top university like MIT or Princeton, you're more likely to sell books than somebody like me. So I'm willing to do this a lot more for the debates. And, I particularly like to talk to people who are trying to do AI. They're in the hospital doing AI, in the factory, and I like to ask them, what are you doing and what's the challenge, and what are the challenges?
Is your phone ringing from organizational leaders? Jeff, can you come in and talk to us about this?
Not really. I mean, I've done some keynote speeches and but I don't do a lot now. It's one of my problems is that I'm in Singapore, and in Singapore we're far from everything. Europe's far away. I get invited to go to Europe a lot, but then they don't like how much I have to charge because it takes a while to get to Europe. If I lived in Europe, I wouldn't charge very much because, I'd take a train someplace and, maybe I'd combine it with a day or two doing something. But Singapore to Europe, it's a long way. It's very tiring. And, I have to be careful about my health, and I don't want to be away for so long with my son and things. I have to keep my priorities in mind now.
Is there an end game for you? Is there something that you are looking to personally gain, enjoy, experience, do from the amount of work that you put in?
So this is my reputation I'm concerned with. And partly, my son's listening now, but I'll say it anyways. When you're trying, do you have kids?
No.
Okay. So people who have kids will know this. I mean, you're always trying to, you want respect from your kids. And kids are hearing a lot of messages out there. Right. So it's, when they're really young, when they're 5, they kind of think you're God. But after a while, they realize you're not God. And there are people smarter than you. So they listen to you less. But if you do well in your work, you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking, my son will listen to me more. My son will respect me more. So there is an end game of I'm concerned about reputation. But maybe I'm concerned about my reputation with my son more than other people. If you've watched the Iron Man movies, the Iron Man's father, Tony Stark's father, says that's what all he cared about was whether Tony respected him.
That's lovely. And he's got a great father, no doubt about that. Any last questions for Jeff before we let him enjoy his evening? Just put your hand up or pop in the chat or give me a wave or put your camera on. No. Wow. Okay.
Richard, I just wanted to throw one thing out to Jeffrey. I'm 58, Jeffrey, for catching up with you quite soon, but I gave a talk during the Edinburgh Festival this year. And it was interesting because the average age of the audience was 80 years old or over. And it was really interesting that the conclusion of the discussion at that meeting is the leaders of AI for Generation Alpha need to be everybody who's over 80. Because what seems to be happening in the hype machine is that we've departed the wisdom that our grandparents give us. Slow down, see if there are any stories that back up what's being said, tell the truth. Don't gorge on it, portion it so it's healthy for you, do good in the world. And it was interesting. It was a wake-up call, I think, that, my generation, maybe yours, we've got the big deal here. We've got the responsibility because we were in our youth when this craziness wasn't so bad.
Yeah, things have changed.
Well, Jeff, thank you for staying a little bit longer, and thank you so much for spending time with us totally today. I consider this to be an important book. I'm really glad that you reached out to me, and for my small part, I hope that I will expose some more people to this, to your writing and to this book, and hopefully sell you a few copies along the way. It would be an honor to do that. Thank you for what you do. I'm a fan, and I really, really appreciate it. And I personally, I just love your writing. Forget all the stuff we've talked about today. I just think you write in a wonderful way that's captivating and balanced and fun. And it's just great to read it. I think I'd read anything that you wrote about, actually.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's absolutely genuine. I've followed you for a long time and many years. Obviously, love staying in touch with you, and just want to join everybody here to say thanks again for your time today and all the work that you do.
Well, thank you.
And we'll sign off for now, but we'll speak again, no doubt.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.